London, 1850. A city wrapped in an air thicker than soot, the memory of an era just awakening, and already lost. In that freezing room, he wrote with ink, but his thoughts burned like molten steel. Marx begins to speak.
I used to believe if we could understand how the world works, we could change it. I walked among people whose bones were worn from labor, and yet they were invisible.
He didn't write for praise. He wrote so someone, finally, might be heard. Marx stood silent by the window, his voice echoing like footsteps pressed into the century.
The history of mankind is the history of class struggle, those who own and those who are owned. But what frightens me most is when the owned no longer realize they are.
He saw their invisibility, not because they didn't exist, but because they were forced to live as if they had no soul. He spoke like whispering to a world that had never paused long enough to listen.
They don't work to live, they work to survive. They sell their time, their strength, and in the end, they sell themselves.
This is no longer labor. This is alienation. When people create value, yet are cut off from it. Marx wasn't angry. He simply looked and spoke, as if each word sliced into a system he could never forgive.
I do not oppose machines, I oppose the way people are turned into them. When everything is measured by productivity, self-worth is put up for sale.
In the darkness of the century, he still believed people could awaken, not by blood, but by awareness. He spoke not like a preacher, but like someone who had once loved humanity, completely.
They don't need permission to be human. They only need to realize they have always been human.
But history is never linear. It turns sharply when those who write the rules learn to disappear. And then, someone else appears. No ink, no paper, no cold wind, only data and power. His name is Jeff Bezos. No more coal smoke, no more sweat on a worker's face, only robots, data, and a new kind of silence, the silence of those who no longer need to speak. He doesn't need to shout. His voice is enough to silence the world, with just one update.
We didn't build an empire. We just made everything more efficient, faster, cheaper, easier for everyone.
When one man believes in revolution and another in algorithms, silence grows heavier than time itself. Marx doesn't speak right away. He looks around, then drops a question, as if it were meant for a world moving too fast to think.
Efficient for whom? For the consumer? Or for those with no time left to live because they're racing to deliver before 5 p.m.?
Bezos doesn't react. He adjusts his cuff and replies like reading from a dashboard.
Technology doesn't take away freedom. It only changes how people use their time.
No more whips, only deadlines. No more guards, only algorithms. Marx leans forward, his voice rising like a hammer strike against indifferent logic.
And time is the one thing humans can't buy back. If they spend their whole lives working for a system they don't own, don't understand, don't control, that isn't progress. That's a refined kind of slavery.
Here, no one screams in your face. The system simply stops giving you tasks. Bezos glances at the screen and speaks, as if truth were a line of clean, well-written code.
I create tools. I don't control people.
Wrong. A tool's not innocent if it runs a system, as that strips people of their meaning.
When everything becomes a metric, humans become numbers, and numbers are easy to replace. Marx looks straight at him, Not as a theorist this time, but as a man asking something deeply human.
Do you remember the name of the last person who delivered a package to you?
Bezos stays silent, then turns away. The answer wasn't a word, it was absence. A world perfectly programmed might run flawlessly. But sometimes, perfection blinds us to the people still living inside it. Marx stands, looking around at the world he did not shape. He speaks, slowly, but heavier than any verdict.
Not everything that can be measured is valuable.
And in the perfect silence, one final question echoes. If people no longer feel they matter, is the system truly working? When the past and present no longer answer the questions, we're forced to look into what hasn't come and ask ourselves, if we keep going like this, what will tomorrow be? Marx walks slowly through this hallucinated field, as if even he doubts this vision was ever his.
I once imagined a world where energy was free, where no one froze to death, where no one had to choose between food and learning, where no one worked themselves to exhaustion just to survive another day.
A simple dream, but never a simple reality. Bezos raises his hand, and the world transforms with just a switch.
I once believed in a world without poverty, without war, without deviation. A world where emotion could be reprogrammed. No more pain, no more anger, only peace.
No one cries anymore, but no one feels tears either. Marx watches quietly, no longer angry, only a vast emptiness rising behind his eyes.
If everything can be programmed, what is still real?
If everything is real, who would still want to dream?
Two visions, a paradise without mistakes, a hell without choices, and sometimes they look exactly the same. He doesn't argue anymore. He speaks, like a man unsure if he even wants to keep looking.
I'm not sure I want to go any further.
For the first time, he says nothing. No more data, no more algorithms, no more history. Only two people, sitting across from each other, in a silence where no one needs to be right anymore. He speaks, as if reminding himself, not others, just himself, not to forget.
I once believed what made humans great was our ability to create everything, tools, systems, ideas to change the world.
Bezos listens. No objections, no interruptions. He simply listens, as if, for the first time, he realized silence also speaks. He responds, not as a billionaire, but as a man who just realized the mirror he'd been staring into all his life never reflected his soul.
I used to think so too.
Marx nods, and then he says something neither of them, perhaps, ever dared to think. This time, not theory, but truth from a man who lost too much to finally understand.
But now I wonder, maybe what makes us human is not what we're willing to create, but what we're willing to give up.
A kind of sacrifice no one teaches, an instinct only humans know, not for gain, but for something higher, the soul. He doesn't speak to Bezos, but to anyone listening, today or 100 years from now.
If you are the future, stop when your heart no longer knows how to ache.
Not forgiveness, not victory, just understanding. And then, Bezos whispers, like a child who finally learned how to hold on to what matters most.
And if you are the past, I won't forget.
If you could speak with someone from any era in time, who would you choose? And what would you ask? We cannot rewind time, but we can listen, learn, and choose a path our hearts still know is right. Not every conversation happens at the right time, but some conversations must be imagined to remind us how to be human. Subscribe if you believe conversation can change the future.